Hi there. Thank you for being here with me today. Definitely a couple days in my future, but either way, thank you for coming. My name is Lilly Whalen, and I'm here to talk to you about my SECU Public Fellows Internship with the nonprofit organization NC Field. I am a student at UNC Chapel Hill, and my intended graduation date is December 2021. I was supposed to graduate this past semester, but things did not line up for me. And I, luckily, with the extra semester, had the chance to do this internship. So thank you so much for that opportunity. Um, I am a student in studying computer science, and I have two minors, one in social and economic justice and the other in Hispanic studies. Uh, so before I get started, I'll just give you a little overview about the presentation that I'll be giving today. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself, and then jump into giving you a quick overview of NC Field and what they do, followed by what work I helped them out with this summer, and what impact that had on both the team, NC Field, and the communities that they support. Finally, I'll follow that by what I learned in my internship, and then finally thank everybody who helped make it happen. So a little bit about me and why I was drawn to the SECU Public Fellows Internship is my connection to rural communities or lack thereof. My family comes from living in big cities like Boston, DC, Chicago. And my parents moved to Raleigh, North Carolina before I was born. And for them, it was a shockingly rural experience. They moved to a suburb pretty far outside of Raleigh, and they were surrounded by farms, and it was a very new experience for them. So I grew up in a relatively rural area, but super close to a city, so not actually a rural community. Is like the outskirts of an urban one. But in high school, I had the chance to um, I received a scholarship to do a bike tour across the country, self-supported, with a group of other high school students. And throughout that trip, I encountered many rural communities. It was the closest relationship or closest experience with rural communities I'd ever had, and the amount of support that I gained from people I met that day who would offer to make me a meal that day or take me into their home and fill up my water bottles. It was an incredible amount of support that I'd never really seen growing up in urban areas. And I was drawn to this internship because of that support that I got from rural communities, and knowing that that was something I wanted to give back. And I think rural communities are such a cornerstone of our country, and they're largely unsupported and ignored, on the grand scale of things. Second, I was also drawn to this program after taking a class last semester, during the pandemic. It was a freedom farming class. So within this class, I was learning about the history of freedom farming in North Carolina, which, if you're unfamiliar, it is the concept of farming that arose post emancipation, and formerly enslaved people had created these independent communities um, outside of the Jim Crow era restrictions that there were on a lot of Black farmers, and created a community separate from discrimination, and discrimination, and created these independent communities supporting themselves. And I was able to actually work on my professor's freedom farm right outside of Chapel Hill, and was doing a lot of learning on the ground and with my hands, and about not only freedom farming and the history of it and the land that I live on, but also the history of the people who lived on this land before us and the indigenous communities who have protected this land for so long and who have so much history with this land that I had never engaged with before. And so throughout that experience, I really learned a lot about the history of North Carolina and the land that we're on right now, and also reevaluated what my learning experience looked like and what it could look like, and decided that I want a lot more out of the jobs I have, and I want to figure out ways to learn from my job and engage with communities through my jobs that I take. So in having that experience with the class, I kind of reevaluated what my post-graduation plans might look like in the future, and decided that I necessarily didn't want to go into big tech, but didn't know what that looked like. So an opportunity to join NC Field and work with them a little bit more on the data side of things with them, and trying to figure out a way I could bring my skills with computer science into working with them was a cool experience for me to figure out what a job might look like for me in the future. So NC Field is an incredible organization, and Yesenia Aquilo is the director. And she was a child of farm workers herself and worked in tobacco fields in Pink Hill, North Carolina growing up. And this is a quote that she has in an article linked below that you could click on and read through. But I found this quote really powerful. And I also find interacting with her really powerful because she is somebody who is working so hard to protect a vulnerable community and also understands that community and is a part of that community. So there's a lot of power in her being the director of this nonprofit that so directly supports farm workers in North Carolina. And she understands the community well and is able to represent that community holistically. And if you have never interacted with her in NC Field, I recommend reaching out and trying to support them from afar, because they're an incredible organization. To get a little bit more into what NC Field does as an organization, they work to provide a lot of health clinics, mainly for farm workers, health clinics and health services, whether that be vaccinating or COVID testing more recently, farm workers, or general health checkups, or connecting farm workers um, to health insurance, or educating farm workers about not only their health rights, but their work rights, and creating a sense of community among farm workers at these events that they're organizing. But on top of medical services, they do provide other resources, such as resources for mothers and children, whether that be diapers or food for babies. They also provide food boxes, as well as try and provide a hot meal that a local community member made a lot of the time at these events, to kind of entice people to come, but also to feed the people who do come, as food insecurity affects the farm worker community a lot. And they also can provide financial assistance depending on what resources they have given that day. This is an example of what a health clinic looks like. So for NC Field, it's really important that they partner with other organizations to provide the health services. So this is an example of a Campbell clinic, where they partner with Campbell University and have pre-med students come in and help run these clinics while they're providing the food, the organization of this event, the language communication. So being a middle ground between English and Spanish a lot of the time. And I, this summer, had less of an experience on the ground as I was a remote due to the pandemic and lack of transportation. But did have the chance one day to go to an in-field activity and take the blood glucose and blood pressure of a bunch of farm workers or at different camps around Lenore County. It was a really incredible experience to get to meet some of my coworkers in person and spend a little bit of time with them, but to also uh, see the work that I was supporting from a remote position, and to get a little bit more into the work that I was doing this summer. The beginning of my week kind of began as getting situated into my position. So shadowing Melissa, one of the other co-directors for NC Field, and reading resources and pamphlets on how to be an activist among the farm worker community and how to support the farm worker community in a way that understands the community better. So getting a lot of cultural literacy. Then I kind of began my position as a data manager almost. I was assisting largely the data manager Sam from NC Field, and that looked like researching different databases. Originally, they had wanted me to build a database, but with the experience that I've had from computer science, knew that that would take a little bit longer than the 2 months that I had with them, and helped them instead look for an affordable option for a database. And we ended up interviewing, but like going to a meeting and talking through with a company and kind of getting a demo of each of these different databases, and then finalized one, purchased it. The next week we had a free trial and we explored the new database and got to look a little bit more into it and decide if this was the right option for us. And we did. And that next week, I ended up preparing resources for the rest of the team and understanding how to use. So putting together a manual and some demo videos to share with the entire organization or the other employees who would be using this database eventually. And then week 6 and 7 became pretty difficult when I was spending the whole day just doing data entry from taking a lot of information from spreadsheets and inputting that into the database manually. And then my final week has been preparing more resources for when I'm gone, and making sure that the rest of the team knows how to create reports from the new database that we purchased. And I also worked on applying for a grant through Carolina Center for Public Service for NC Field, so that they can potentially have more funding for the great work that they're doing. So the impact that I had on NC Field was kind of lightening the workload and providing as a source of expertise on what a database needs to look like and what it should look like, and then helping make that come true, that the dream of having a database come true, by being there while they purchased it, and also onboarding all of their data into the new database. So throughout the 2 weeks that I was really working on the data entry, my coworker and I got over 1,100 cases into the system. And those cases are farm workers that they have served at previous events and collected their information. So their phone number, address, date of birth, lots of information, and some assessments too of health records. And then grant writing, obviously, helping them apply for a grant. So takeaways from my internship: I definitely, after this, see the value and want to continue providing for rural communities that I benefit from. The farm worker community largely is our entire food system, and providing support to those who provide us food and who are supporting us all the time is something that seems incredibly valuable to me and that I want to continue to do, whether that be working with a rural nonprofit or supporting a rural nonprofit from afar. I also now see ways to bring my skills outside of just big tech after graduation and not necessarily getting a job right off the bat in a um, giant company, but instead finding ways I could bring my skills to smaller companies or nonprofits around North Carolina. I also really appreciated being a part of a small team um, and getting to know my coworkers so intimately and having that be most of the people on the team. So really having a good understanding of everybody who I was working with and what was going on in their lives. I do think another takeaway I have is that I really like in-person work and work that has movement to it. And I think this remote internship was a good demonstration to me that I don't necessarily uh, want to work a remote job in the future, although I didn't have much of a choice given the pandemic and working with a community or not having transportation. And finally, I wanted to share my thanks to the SECU Foundation, Margaret, Caroline, and Nancy Field for making this summer happen for me. Thank you.